The wind smelled of iron and nightfall, a knife-edged chill that rasped across the blackwood rails of silence and stitched frost into the seams of every sail. Euron Greyjoy stood alone at the prow, hand pressed over the dragonbone patch that hid the ruin where his eye had once glimmered. The deck groaned under the weight of winter's first promise, but the crow's eye felt only an immense stillness, as though the world were drawing breath before some forgotten creed of slaughter. Far ahead, beyond the trembling horizon, the wall rose in his mind's eye, pallid, devouring, alive with secrets. And somewhere above it, if the dreams were true, an ice-born worm carved ribbons of rime through a sky so cold it rang like crystal. He would have it. He would have everything. Behind him, the oars of 20 reeving longships dipped in silent rhythm, their crews bound to obedience by tongues he had taken, by fear, by coin, and by the shimmering promise of sorceries none of them understood. No drum beat guided their cadence. The hush was broken only by the low moan of timbers and the sigh of the black tide swirling under the hulls. Even the sea seemed subdued, as if the drowned god himself dared not disturb the voyage. On the quarterdeck, the mute navigator known as Featherless drew breath in tight, bird-quick sips, eyes darting to the north. His throat still bore the welted rings where Euron had gifted him silence. He swallowed, mouthing wordless prayers to gods that never listened. Across the deck, a gaunt warlock from far Korth huddled within a cloak embroidered with decline and dust, fingers clasped around a phial of shade-gore. The warlock's pupils were pinpricks of blue flame. He had spoken only twice since boarding in Old Town, and each syllable tasted of gravestone and hunger. Euron heard him now, even though no sound traveled. A whisper at the base of the skull. It is near. The doom beneath snow. The horn must drink the cold of the dead before it will wake the sky serpent. Euron smiled without turning, let the frail conjurer shiver behind his perfumed silks. The iron-born lord felt fire coursing in his veins. He lifted his gaze to the rippling curtains of aurora that had begun to shimmer in pale green scars across the vault of night. They danced like tendrils of some vast leviathan's spine, beckoning, promising. The voyage had already devoured a moose turning. They had raided the lonely outposts that clung to the Skagos cliffs, taken fresh meat, stolen furs heavy with the musk of silver-tipped bears, and nailed the skins of milk-white deer wolves to their masts. At Cape Kraken, Euron had bartered a box of dragonglass spearheads to a clan chieftain who wore a necklace of children's teeth. In return, he received an obsidian disc etched with glyphs so old they seemed to bleed at a man's glance. The disc now hung at his belt, pulsating faint heat against the cold. The dusk deepened. Euron extended a gloved hand toward the water. Snow fell in hesitant flakes, settling upon the raven-black leather like dust on a tomb. He admired the geometry of each shot. Under the drifting hush, he felt a tremor, a throb from the horn stowed below. Dragonbinder veined and sullen, bound in bands of red gold, inscribed with runes whose vowels would peel the flesh from mortal tongues. It had tasted fire once at the Kingsmoot, and the memory of that agonized call still haunted the nights of many an Ironborn. Yet Dragonbinder was not forged for fire alone. Valyria had bred monsters of every hue. If the tales of the Shadowlands were more than ash-soaked fables, there had been dragons carved of moonlight and void, beasts whose breath could freeze a man's soul where he stood. Euron intended the horn to claim such a prize tonight. He strode aft, boots crunching a film of burgeoning ice. Sailors watched with wide, empty eyes. They had not spoken Euron's name aloud in days. Some clutched driftwood fetishes carved into shapes that might once have been mermaids, or might have been shrieking things pulled from a maelstrom's heart. One boy, scarcely 16, pressed a talon-stripped gull skull to his chest, and mouthed a nursery song about sailors lost in fog. Euron tasted the fear rippling across the deck and found it sweet. A hiss rose behind him. The warlock, Mazalaro of the Malignant Path, had unfurled a length of pallid silk. Symbols writhed across its surface like bruises blooming upon dead flesh, spirals within spirals, spears of shattered ice, a single eye blacker than void. Mazalaro whispered breath that smelled of wormwood and dust. Euron paused, head cocked. "The veil is thin here." The warlock rasped, voice brittle as frost. "I can hear them, crow's eye. They march in a silence older than language. Bones grinding bones, snow upon snow." "Then guide me through it," Euron answered, voice calm as still water. "Show me the road the dead forgot." Mazalaro's smile cracked like old parchment. He bent, pressing the silk to the planks, and the sigils swam, spilling tendrils of pale light that smeared across the deck. The hull groaned. Somewhere deep in the hold, Dragonbinder gave a single, almost curious pulse, as though sensing a kindred cry. "Far off," a horn replied. No mortal brass, but a howl of wind fluted through canyons of ice. It rose, fell, and rose again, lingering in the night, like the memory of a scream. The sailors froze, as though a skein of glass had hardened around their limbs. Euron closed his remaining eye and breathed in the sound. It was hunger given voice, loneliness made music, a lover's plea to be devoured. He knew then that they had crossed the border no map recorded. They sailed not only north of the wall, but north of remembrance. The oars quickened at an unspoken command. Featherless coughed, spraying a mist that crystallized before it touched the deck. He pointed ahead. Euron followed the gesture, a shape resolved in the gloom, a fortress carved by giants, and then abandoned to the mercy of wind. Jagged teeth of ruined masonry jutted from a headland, and between them an entryway yawned like a wolf's maw. Fires guttered within, low and blue. Beyond the ruins, a river of pale mist snaked inland toward the mountains. The place had no name. Even the old charts from Bravos left this coast blank. But Euron had dreamt of it each night since he tore the isles asunder with his fleets. The dream had been precise. The fortress, the river, and beyond both, an empty sky waiting to be claimed. He signaled with a raised fist. The fleet slowed, oars slipping into the black sea with barely a murmur. Euron's boots thudded down the companionway into the hold. Cold darkness greeted him. He tasted iron in the air, Dragonbinder's breathing. The horn crouched atop an altar of weirwood stained near purple by centuries of forgotten rites. It throbbed, veins flickering like coals. Euron brushed his fingertips along the sigils that coiled up its length. Serpents devouring their own tails, towers toppled by lightning, eyes without lids. His blood hummed to match its pulse. "When I sound you," he whispered, "the world will crack." A step behind him. A soldier of the Shield Islands, one of many thralls taken at Oakenshield, loomed with a torch. His expression was blank, but the pupils danced. The fumes from Mazalaro's incense had spread, loosening minds, reshaping them. Euron gestured, and the man knelt without a word. Blade met flesh. A heartbeat later, blood steamed against the icy air, splattering the horn's ridged surface. Dragonbinder drunk. Toritos. Crimson spread, sank, vanished. Euron felt the horn's warmth flare, greedy. The soldier collapsed soundlessly. The drums he had not allowed on deck now pounded in his skull. He heaved Dragonbinder over one shoulder and climbed toward the command deck. Snow whirled thicker, half hiding the ghost-lit ruins ahead. Behind them, the other vessels fanned in a crescent, silent guardians of a rite none could name. Euron reached the bow, set the horn upright, and pressed lips to the rim. The chill was a bite deep enough to strip bone. and for one blink he tasted winter's marrow. Then he blew. No mortal could have described the sound. It was wind and thunder, the groan of glaciers splitting, the roar of 1,000 battlefields remembered by dying men. It poured into the night like molten starfire, carving runes across the sky. Beneath silence, timbers shuddered. Across the flank of every ship in the flotilla, hulls moaned as though dragged through invisible reefs. Men screamed without voices. Women wept scarlet tears. Euron held the note until lungs burned black, and still the horn clawed for more. At last he staggered back, blood spattering from nostrils and lips, but he laughed until the laughter broke into coughs too ragged to be called human. The echoes rolled outward. One beat past. Jawai. The world swallowed the sound, and in that hush even waves forgot their duty. Then the sky ripped. It began as cracks of pale blue lightning, spider vines etching darkness. The northern lights convulsed, twisting into a spiral. The spiral tightened, pulled itself into a single slit of brilliance far above the fortress. Through that wound poured a column of ice-cold radiance, descending upon the ruin like the finger of an angry god. It struck stone and split it, dust erupting in a halo that flashed white and was gone. From the heart of the blast, a shadow unfolded. Vast wings cleaved from deepest midnight, but along their span shimmered veins of purest frost. Scales glimmered like hammered moonlight, edges sharp enough to flay wind. The creature's head alone loomed larger than Silence's forecastle. Twin eyes, pale cerulean, depthless, opened, and the world seemed to tilt toward oblivion. An ice dragon, alive, wreathed in a nimbus of hoarfrost that hardened the very air around it into shards that hissed as they fell. Its roar shook the fleet, a resonance so low it drilled into bone. Sailors dropped to their knees. Some clutched their ears, though no man could block such sound. A few flung themselves overboard, seeking mercy in the black water. Featherless collapsed, trembling like a stricken hare. Mazzolaro only stared, lips moving wordlessly. Euron stood. The roar pressed against him as a hurricane might press against a tower of basalt. He spread his arms, let the cold wash over him until every hair upon his body crystallized. A grin carved itself across his face, feral and bright. In his chest, his heart answered the dragon, beat for beat, thrill for thrill. Dragonbinder lay at his feet, silent now, satisfied. The ice dragon circled above the ruins, slow and majestic, each flap stirring a blizzard that whirled across the sea. It peered down, and when its gaze settled upon Silence, the world between them thinned. Frost crawled along the ship's rails, creeping toward Euron's boots. Yet he did not move. Instead, he reached within his cloak and withdrew the obsidian disk. It pulsed, a pooling glow, as though moonlight bled through volcanic glass. He lifted it high. The glyphs upon its surface ignited, lines of terrible clarity, etched by hands that could not possibly have been human. They pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat. A second roar tore the heavens. The dragon slowed, banking, wings sluicing dark. Snow ribbons spiraled from its pinion. It hovered above the fortress's shattered gate, breath mingling with the storms it wrought. For an instant, the horns of its head aligned with the stars like a crown wrought by winter itself. Euron stepped onto the rail, balancing above the hungry sea. He raised his voice. "Come to me, child of night," he shouted, words borne on steam that frosted midair. "I will free you from your frozen birthright. I will give you war and kingdoms and souls enough to sout the void within your belly." The dragon's eyes narrowed. A sound like plates of granite grinding soared above the wind. Its chest expanded. Frost poured from its maw in slow strands, weaving shapes that sparkled and broke upon invisible currents. Mazzalaro lurched forward. "Bind it now, Lord of Storms," he hissed, voice raw. "The horn's claim is fleeting." "Quiet," Euron whispered, never shifting his gaze. He felt threads, silken, perilous, stretching between the horn, the disc, and the living frost shaping itself above him. He imagined tugging those threads like a harpist commanding melody. He lowered the disc, placed it upon the rail, and with a single motion slashed open his palm. Blood welled black. He pressed the wound against the glyphs. Flame and ice merged. Steam scalded upward, swirling into symbols that mirrored the disc secrets in the air itself. He spoke the ancient Valyrian syllables Mazzalaro had scrawled upon so many wilted parchments, each word tasting of rusted snow and drowned fire. The sound did not echo. It sank heavy into the sea. At first, nothing changed. The dragon bled frost and light, unmoved. Then it shivered, a ripple that passed from wingtip to tail. The terrible head cocked. It breathed again, but this exhalation carried no roar. It was a question. Euron's heartbeat hammered. He repeated the phrase, louder, offering blood and breath together. He felt the world hush, as though listening. A boom cracked the ice-laden air. Scales split above the dragon's breastbone, revealing a fissure where pale blue radiance spilled like molten sapphire. The creature convulsed. Snow exploded outward. The light in its eyes flared. Euron staggered, every nerve afire. He tasted copper, brimstone, secrets. The threads between them tightened into steel cables. Somewhere in his mind, foreign coldness groped, searching for harbor. He resisted, bending it to his will. Another heartbeat passed. The dragon folded its wings and dropped. Men screamed as the mass of living winter plunged toward the sea, but the creature halted a dozen yards above silence. Its wings snapped outward, spears of ice trailing. Frozen seawater erupted beneath, showering the deck with knives that rang off armor and bit into flesh. The dragon hovered, waiting. Euron lifted his bleeding hand and touched 2 fingers to his brow in salute. "You are mine," he breathed. The blue eyes flickered, dangerous, curious. Yet in their depths, Euron sensed acquiescence, or the semblance of it. "Enough for now." He turned. "Prepare the chains," he called, voice carrying in the stunned quiet. "The cold iron? The ones lined with lead? And fetch me every cage made for whites. We shall cradle our new companion." No one moved. He pivoted, eye blazing. "Now, or feed yourselves to the sea." The deck erupted into frantic motion. Chains thick as a man's thigh were hauled up from cargo holds. Links quarried in the smoking forges of pike, quenched in salt, etched with runes, shipped at obscene cost from Ashai. Crane masts swung. Tarps fluttered like dying banners. Euron returned his gaze to the dragon. He felt an ache blooming behind his patch, as though the lost eye still sought to see this marvel. He wished suddenly that all his enemies stood upon these decks to witness the moment. Let Asha gape, Theon tremble, Victarion rot. Let kings and dragons and wolves of winter bow before the crow's eye who harnessed cold itself. The dragon's wings beat once, slow thunder, and silence heaved sideways. Chains clattered across plank and rampart. Men swore, scrabbling for purchase, but Euron did not shift. He felt the beast sampling his strength, testing for weakness. He gave none. The threads held. Hush settled. Snow swirled thicker, draping ship and sailors alike in pale shrouds. In the distance, beyond the ruins, a pale green glow flared, the aurora bending low, as though kneeling. The warlock approached, trembling from more than cold. "You have done it," he stammered, awe drowning his rasp. "But the song is not yet finished. Others will come. Others who claim this cold." Euron laughed quietly. Each puff of breath froze in midair, hanging glittering before falling to dust. "Let them. The North remembers fear, and I will teach it new verses." He turned to the shadows gathering at the mouth of the fortress. Figures emerged, gaunt, eyes burning an impossible blue, blades rimed with hoarfrost. Whites and behind them, silhouettes taller, arrayed in spiked armor staggeringly delicate. The others had heard dragon binders call. Euron's grin widened. He raised his voice once more, not for the dragon, but for the dead. "You seek a master," he shouted. "Find him in me, or break upon my will." The dragon roared again, spraying frost so condensed it fell as crystalline shards, shredding banners, flaying paint from hullwood. The creatures at the gate paused, uncertain. Chains rattled as crews began their gambit, hooks hurled skyward, latching onto ridges between the dragon's scales. The beast's eyes flickered. Muscles rolled under its icy hide, but the threads held. For now, Euron felt the first hooks bite deeper. He spoke softly, Valyrian laced with charm and threat, coaxing, promising. The dragon's chest heaved. Frost smoked between its teeth, yet it did not strike. It let the chains settle, loose for now, a collar forged of mortal ambition. When the iron tightened, it would tighten slowly. There would be time. The ruin's gate spat out the first white howling into the snow-lashed air. An ironborn axe split its skull, but no cheer followed. Dread, smothered sound. Still, the line ranks held, shields rhymed, spears leveled. Euron spread his arms to embrace wind and death alike. Above him, the ice dragon's wings draped the night like a funeral shroud. Snow howled, frost blazed, and somewhere, far beyond the mortal continuum of fear and hope, the crow's eye felt destiny flex talons around his heart. This was only the beginning. 5 hours, 5 lives, 5 kingdoms. Time itself would come to kneel. Snow laced the rigging like half-strung harp strings, each thread humming under the weight of mounting wind. The dragon's presence warped air and gravity, as though the world bent inward around the knot of frost and power suspended above silence. Chains clanked in slow, deliberate rhythms, while men strained against capstans to draw the slack inch by inch. Each link glimmered with frost filigree, a necklace forged for the neck of winter's own god. Above, the creature held itself steady, vast wings fanning sheets of sleet that hissed as they struck salted oak. The hiss built into a steady lament, a dirge for reason and warmth. Euron paced the deck with a deliberate calm that put dread to shame. His boots crunched on brittle ice, his breathing smoked in plumes. Blood still wept between the fingers of his wounded hand, painting a trail that gleamed dark under lantern light. Every so often he paused to press his thumb against the rail, stamping his crimson sigil upon the ship, the same way he had branded islands and men and gods with his ambition. Somewhere amid the storm of his thoughts, he marked time. Each heartbeat a drum, each breath a creep. The first wave of whites came not as a tide but a whisper, shapes sagging under coats of rime, their joints stiff-cricked but implacable. They numbered fewer than a score, yet moved with the confidence of carrion drawn by inexorable scent. Ironborn shields braced along the gangboard that bridged ship and ruin. Spears jutted forward, heads black where dragon glass had been hammered to steel. The men holding them shivered, not from cold alone, but from the recognition that death wore familiar faces. Many of these corpses had once sailed those same decks, before Euron's demands and the night's cold mercy had parted flesh from life. An arrow thrummed overhead, feathered in gull bone, tip fashioned from obsidian chipped to razor curve. It burst in a cloud of icy smoke against a white skull. The thing crumpled, limbs folding like wet parchment, eyes extinguished in a scatter of pale sparks. Yet the rest pressed on, stepping over it with mechanical certainty. Axes rose, blades fell, cracks echoed. No blood scented the air, only cold and the splinter of bone. Euron watched with more curiosity than concern. He noted each stroke that shattered a corpse, each ironborn gasp that steamed bright and brief. The dragon hovered silent witness, its wings slow as cathedral doors, gaze fixed not on the battle but on Euron himself. Threads sang between them. He felt them vibrate at every drop of tension, as though the monster's will tested the knot-binding beast to conjurer. A single clash would not hold the others at bay, and the crow's eye cared little for such preludes. The whites were but the rattling of a lock on gates yet unopened. Still, each slain corpse fueled whispers among the men that their dragonglass worked, that old tales had not lied entirely. Hope was a dangerous coin, but fear spent sweeter. Euron let them taste both. When the last white fell, the hush that toppled in its wake was more terrifying than the fight. Men's breaths came ragged. Bloodless snowflakes dusted their helms. Beyond the broken line, the gate to the fortress yawned, flanked now by tall specters wrought from darkness refracted through ice. They bore slender spears that shimmered the hue of frozen moonlight. Their crowns of hoarfrost antlers brushed stone lintels as they advanced. Euron strode to the fore, flicked ice from his sleeve, and raised a gauntleted hand. "Back," he called. The command snapped through nerves and sinew. Ironborn melted aside, drawing shields to shoulders. No one protested. In them, the crow's eye saw that peculiar vacancy, the mind's flight before the body's last stand. He stepped onto the gangboard. Underfoot, timbers pinged as frost expanded wood grain. The ruins courtyard unfurled before him, towers gashed by centuries, snowdrifts sculpted into false battlements, whole domes glimmering like hollowed pearls. Blue fire flickered in braziers that no living hand had kindled. They cast no heat, only light that made bones luminous beneath flesh. The others halted halfway across cracked flagstones. Cold haloed them. Their armor resembled glass grown by winter storms. Curling filigrees, translucent plates edged in frost. Their faces were masks of void beneath which twin starbursts of azure smoldered. One lifted a hand, palm open in something that might have been greeting or challenge. Euron drew a breath laced with knives. Words older than old Valyria rattled in his skull. Shards of races dead since the Roin first turned. Phrases gleaned from scrolls, pried out of mummified fists in shadowed vaults. He let them spill. The sounds tasted like glacial water, sharp enough to etch enamel. They hung in the air between adversaries, refusing to evaporate. The lead other cocked its head, as a raven might before plucking an eye from carrion. Its spear dipped. Frost raced along the shaft in patterns of fractal horror. Yet it did not advance. Instead, it replied, not in speech, but in a pulse of presence. A sensation of tundra stretching beneath black constellations. Endless night broken only by auroras that danced like hounds devouring the moon. A promise of dominion, unyielding. Of silence, eternal. Euron laughed softly. "Yes," he said, unmoved. "Silence is mine." He gestured back toward his ship. "And I have stolen your storm." The dragon keened above, a sound close to lament yet fraught with a savage yearning. Its wings beat once, and a squall swept across courtyard and ship alike, avalanching snow from parapets. The others' mantles thrashed yet remained unstirred within. Their eyes shifted. The lead figure regarded the blue-white titan hanging under heaven's vault, then returned its glare to Euron. Thread by thread, The crow's eye felt a contest begin, silent as two glaciers colliding beneath dark seas. He sensed their will reach for the dragon, prodding, cajoling, commanding. Their claim was ancient, inscribed in winters older than memory. But his was etched in blood and horn blast, sealed by words stolen from those who had first forged drakes out of starfire and moonstone. He opened his wounded palm. Blood smoked in the cold. With deliberate slowness he pressed his tongue to crimson, tasting iron and the copper spark of life. The shiver coursed through him, not from chill, but from that intimate communion with mortality. He spat the draught upon snow, tracing a circle. Within its rim, symbols bloomed. Circles bisected by jagged lines, eyes without lids, crosses of 3 arms intersecting, glyphs that hungered. The others watched, silent. Euron raised his voice into chant, each syllable cadenced to the slow toll of his heart. The runes within the blood circle kindled, glowing ember red. Heat bled into air, twisting snow into serpents of steam. Above, the dragon answered, not in voice but motion. Wings canted, body torqued, turning its vast head until glacier-bright eyes fixed upon the circle's flame. Ud pulled taut, thrummed discord through invisible harp strings. Euron's chant deepened. He felt marrow vibrate, veins chime. Words became roaring. The blood sigils writhed, lines crawling over flagstone, etching a web that stretched to the fortress walls. Each carved groove filled with molten red that hissed where frost had claimed stone. The others reacted as predators sensing flame. They recoiled a step, spears lowering reflexively. Breath puffed ghost white from their unseen mouths, swirling like vipers around mirrored helms. Yet they did not flee. These were lords of winter. They feared no man's fire. But something in the symbols carved from Euron's veins gave them pause. Recognition or memory, perhaps terror. The chant reached crescendo. Euron thrust his hands upward. Dragonbinder, left upon the deck, answered with a muffled hum that rattled hull and mast. Its runes seared anew, scarlet upon black. The horn strained at leather lashes that bound it. A sailor screamed. The lash melted, flesh crisping. The horn rolled free, scarred decks charring beneath its heat despite the icy squall. It skidded to starboard rail, lodged between capstan spokes, and there it sang, a voice no ears could bear without bleeding. The dragon's wings spasmed. A whip crack of air slammed sailors into ropes. Frost foam fountained from sea swells where gusts cleaved the water. The beast's throat lumined, a bloom of glacial sapphire. It exhaled, not a roar, but a plume of condensed cold, so pure the air crystallized in a corridor stretching from dragon to fortress gate. Within that corridor, snowflakes hovered motionless, each etched with fractal precision. The others raised their spears. Frost coalesced into blades along shafts. They moved with choreographed elegance, stepping left, then right, aligning ends of their weapons like the teeth of some monstrous key, poised to unlock night's last mystery. The spears struck the corridor as one. Glass shrieked. The frozen air shattered, burst upward in a cascade of diamond dust. Light from the braziers refracted into shards of emerald and amethyst that danced like captive stars. The shock wave bulged outward. Ice fractured under Euron's boots. Flagstones exploded into rime shards that pinged off his cuirass. The chain leashes tethering. The dragon snapped taut, some snapping entirely. One coil rebounded across the deck, gutting a mast hand whose scream died as lungs collapsed under sudden vacuum. Yet the beast remained tethered by will. Euron stumbled, knees hitting cracked ice. He felt blood seep from ear and nose. Somewhere behind, Mazzalara wailed, clutching a shattered femur, but the sound faded beneath the deeper hum of collisions between eldritch forces. The disk of obsidian at Euron's belt blazed white, then black, then white again, cycling like a heartbeat in tachycardia. With effort that ground bone, he climbed to his feet. Opposite him, the lead other stretched an arm toward the dragon. Thread lines warped, cold gravity pulling, dragging will from Euron's grasp. He felt his connection fray, fibers tearing, vision doubled. The dragon's eyes flickered. A pulse of alien thought flamed behind that veneer of Norwegian ice. Choices, potentials, shifting. He hurled new words, barbed with rage. He invoked the drowned god, the storm god, the nameless shades that breathed in Valyria before the second doom. He offered them sacrifice, his own eye, his tongue, the hearts of every soul on his fleet, anything to tip the scales. The world's fabric hummed as if deciding. A great roar crescendoed behind him, Ironborn cheering or wailing. He could not tell. Dragonbinder shrieked. Euron glimpsed the horn's gilded ridges crack, fracturing under strain. Smoke? No. Vapor sublimated straight from solid to mist. Gouts of near-liquid night poured off the horn into the sea. The hold burst open, surrendering crates of war plunder now aflame with needled sparks. Flame that produced no heat, only dark radiance. Euron tore Dragonbinder's dying song into his chant, weaving horn scream with blood symbol. He forced his thinning threads to intertwine with the horn's final chord of power. For an instant, he felt all the worlds, past, potential, unfurl like scrolls across black sand. He tasted the despair of Valyria's children as their scaled gods turned to stone, the horror of Ashai when the sky wept black glass, the silence of Leng when its rulers chained storms for candles. He seized that ruin, molding it into chainmail for his will. The thread snapped back into place, taut as harp strings newly tuned. The dragon jerked toward him, wings beating a gale that flattened banners along fortress walls. One scale edge sheared a buttress from a tower. Masonry tumbled in an avalanche of sound. The others stopped mid-advance. Frost wavered around them like doubt given substance. Their spears angled uncertainly. Euron spat laughter, each syllable spattering black blood. He stepped over the broken corridor, across the divide where air still quivered from improbable cold. He entered striking range of the nearest other. Its eyes flared, shards of ice swirling within. It thrust its spear not at his heart, but at the rune web inscribed behind him. The spear's tip kissed the line where blood heat sizzled. A boom hammered the courtyard, flash of scarlet meeting jerk of winter. The sigils burst outward, eruptions of superheated steam and ruby light that lit the fortress as though a second sun rose beneath the snow. Shock waves flung bodies, living, dead, undead, into walls. Euron was thrown backward, hit the ground hard, slid across ice until a broken pillar halted his momentum. Pain sang behind his ribs. He coughed a clot that melted snow pink. Above him, the dragon convulsed, pinned between chains half cloven, its own will contested. It loosed a scream, so potent the aurora overhead shattered into drifting shards of green and violet that fluttered like spent leaves. The sight enthralled even the specters of night. The others paused mid-strike to stare at heavens made brittle by unnatural voice. Sensing the stillness, Euron rose. One knee quaked. He drove a fist into the joint, wresting obedience from faltering sinew. He looked for the Carthene warlock. Mazzalaro lay sprawled, leg twisted, but his eyes were lucid pools of midnight oil. Their gazes clashed. An unspoken pact sparked. The warlock reached into folds of cloak, withdrew a vial of shade oil so dark it consumed lantern glow. With both hands trembling, he hurled it high. Time slowed. The vial tumbled end over end, catching glints of shattered aurora in its glassy skin. It arced toward the dragon, but Euron understood. Not to the beast's hide, but to the place where chains still bound it to mainmast. One heavy chain, Rund iron cord with lead remained intact. If the others were broken, that single link was leash and choke. The vial shattered against that chain. Darkness erupted, a flower of Stygian fire whose petals devoured light. Where it kissed iron, metal sizzled, corroding through alchemic curses. The chain snapped with a sound like a great door slamming against angels' wings. Freedom rung through the dragon's form. Euron braced, fearing the beast might wheel upon him, severing all threads in rejection. Instead, it angled upward and out, clearing towers in a tilt of impossible grace, climbing until it was a shard of new moon hung amidst the broken lights of sky. Snow corkscrewed in its wake, silver storms that split into smaller vortices, each raining shards that rang like distant chimes. The others reacted at last. Their leader hurled its spear skyward, tip spinning end over end, trailing frost streamers. It passed close to the dragon's tail but missed. On impact with clouds, the spear exploded into a blossoming of crystalline thorns that reached down as tendrilled bear traps. Some latched upon the dragon's wings. The cusp of flight tore. The screech of pain rent mountain echoes. Yet the beast kept climbing, dragging thorns that cracked in its slipstream. Euron knew opportunity in calamity's husk. The others had staked claim and failed. The dragon's wound bled frost but sealed. Their spears still hovered in shards, each lodged to intangible energy lines between realm and sky. He sensed them, luminous nets upon which destinies crawled like luminous spiders. He reached with imagination sharpened to a razor. Words left him in a hiss, not Valyrian nor any spoken tongue, but a raw convocation of want. He named the shards by resonance, first fear, then hunger, then conquest. His voice rapped the shards, bent them from the dragon to a new target, the courtyard gate. They obeyed. Thorns wrenched free, reversing momentum. Freezing lines plunged toward the lead other, impaling ground in crisscrossing lattice that caged them within ribs of living ice. Blue eyes flared too late. The lattice contracted, nodding around statues cut from storm's heart. A crack rippled. Ice-devoured frost armor crawled through musculature carved of night. When the lattice constricted to a foot's breadth, the lead other shattered. A column of shards that pinged off stone like hail. The remaining specters recoiled. Their spears hammered lattice bars, but each blow birthed more ice, thickening prison walls. Euron dragged breath through broken ribs and roared triumph to cloud skies. The dragon wheeled overhead, trajectory now a great circling. It descended, not toward silence, but courtyard center. Chains dangled like spent serpents, hooks sparking lightning as they scraped broken parapets. Snow cycloned beneath as its wings braked. It landed, careful Titanic, in a storm of frost plumes that blanketed corpses anew. One white skull, splintered under foreclaw, the size of trebuchet stone. Blue eyes of trapped others turned to follow the descent, luminous yet unreadable. Euron advanced, each footstep igniting small spurts of steam, where his blood sigil still burned between flagstones. The dragon's fore he halted, tilting chin up until its muzzle filled his vision. The serried icicle fangs layered behind translucent lips, nostrils exhaling blizzards. The wound along its right wing slowly refroze, leaving a seam glittering like seam-welded diamond. Within its eyes unfurled labyrinths of fractal ice, infinite corridors of memory, born in sub-zero eternity. He sensed a question there, not trust, but curiosity, perhaps hunger. The lean of a beast that had not chosen servitude but found interest in its captor's defiance of older claims. He lowered to one knee, touched his bleeding palm to cold stone, and offered a line of heat to ripple through frost. Salutation, not of subservience, but parity. The dragon lowered its head. Frost eddied between horns, spiking backward like crescent moons. Its breath enveloped him. His beard iced instantly, lashes clumped with rime. Yet cold burned less than exhilaration, surging his veins. They regarded each other, predator to predator. Euron felt words form within, not spoken. Images, a vault of perpetual white, distant roars across mountain valleys, a hunger that dwarfed oceans. He countered with his own visions, ships aflame in Golden Bay, thrones fashioned from swords of kneeling kings, continents sewn together under banners of black kraken entwined with pale drake. The vision exchange fused in a middle ground of silence, older than language. Euron reached up, laid hand upon skin, cold beyond ice yet alive. A pulse beat within, slow, monstrous. Their threads wove tighter, knotting into rope. Behind them, chains of ice binding the others began to splinter under relentless spears. Cracks, spiderwebbed. One spearhead punched through lattice, bursting into shards that clipped Euron's shoulder. Pain sliced, warm blood sizzling as it touched snow. He ignored it. "Lie with me," he whispered to the dragon, "and I will teach the world to freeze or burn by our choice." Its pupils narrowed. A roar birthed, but stilled. Instead, the beast extended its foreclaw, claws scraping stone, forming a cradle. The intention bloomed within Euron's mind. Mount Uri. He stepped into the cradle, blood-stained rime as his boots found purchase on smooth scale. The dragon lifted him carefully to its back, placing him between ridges that jutted along spine. Leather cords, remnants of broken chains, lay tangled. He wrapped them, fashioning makeshift reins, though he doubted that matter. The will between them would guide. A blast thundered behind. Ice lattice burst, shards strumming courtyard like harp plucks. The surviving others exploded outward, 6 shadows with sapphire heart. They darted toward the dragon in flares of speed that blurred edges of reality. Spears thrust to pierce soft belly scales where flight hindered armor. The dragon leapt just as first spear kissed hide. Frost breath jetted downward, flash freezing ground into slick obsidian that trapped the lead pursuer up to waist. Wings beat, shattering buttresses anew. Snow roared in twin vortices. The dragon ascended, Euron clinging to sinew ridges, winds flaying cloak into ragged pennant. He looked down briefly. Spectral forms dwindled, shrinking to shards that hurled frustrated lances of ice skyward. 3 spears lanced upward, trailing comets of pale flame. The dragon rolled, wings cupping wind. 2 spears flashed past. The third grazed left hindwing, carving a groove that erupted in frost sleet. Euron felt jolt, but bonds held. They cleared fortress spires. Behind, the fleet lay scattered along coastline. Masts broken, decks laden with corpses. Yet some ships rallied. Signal torches flickered. Survivors watched sky with terror and devotion. Euron guided Will forward. The dragon banked south, making for the wall's looming silhouette. That pale barrier shimmered under shattered aurora, a ribbon of jagged teeth crowned by palisades. Atop its height, torch fires glimmered, black shadows moved. Night's Watch garrisons would not have faced many wonders, but the sight of an ice dragon carrying a one-eyed kraken lord would carve epics into hearts. Euron savored anticipation. As they neared, he gathered power from Horn's lingering embers, from blood sigils faintly throbbing lines now miles behind. He funneled it into a command: cloak them. Not pure invisibility, but confusion. Auroral shards swirling around dragon's frame, bending light, spitting illusions of multiple forms. Even the beast's roar he dampened into subharmonic tremors that rattled stones, but offered no clear bearing. Arrow nests along the wall fired regardless, shafts whistling upward in desperate arcs. Most fragmented against sleet aura, shards of ice thinning to deflect. A few stuck between scales, then snapped as wings flexed. The wall loomed, a continent of frozen stone and water, a monument to hubris of the first men and children combined. Euron weighed options: soar above ramparts, risk scorpions and secrets of black powder, or carve a gate. The dragon supplied answer. It inhaled. Chest swelled, plates shifting. Frostlight pooled at throat until it drowned neck membranes in radiant azure. It exhaled upon a bastion near Eastwatch, breath shearing ice in a cone that crackled deeper than thunder. Ice did not melt. It sublimed, stone fracturing under sudden volume decrease, cracks racing like lightning through supercooled glass. A tunnel birthed itself, a ragged corridor billowing white particulate. The dragon folded wings partially, arrowed its body through breach. Walls of translucent blue streaked past. Wind screamed. Euron ducked instinctively. Shards zipped overhead. They burst onto southern side. Snow whipped in gale rising from Gif's plains. Dawn's first hint pearled horizon, but winter's stars still glared. Below, forests black with spruce sprawled, fingers reaching to swallow light. Farther south, candle clusters of villages dotted hills, unaware. The dragon leveled flight, riding thermals. Behind them the walls wound steamed, refreezing edges knitting like lips, sealing a secret. But not before White's glimpsed passage. Spectral forms already streamed through unhindered by arrow fire that found little hold in fleshless ranks. Euron felt triumph bruise his ribs. He had breached barrier older than dynasties, but exultation mingled with calculation. The dragon's hunger rumbled under him, a quaking through ridges. It needed sustenance, something more nourishing than wind or moonlight. He directed senses earthward, scanning for life heat. Herds of elk drifted across white meadows. Wolves prowled tree lines, none sufficient. But to west, where foothills cradled hot springs, he sensed human blood thrumming, an isolated free-folk settlement allowed through by recent Night's Watch treaties. Dozens of hearts pumping, flush with warmth and iron. The dragon's head angled that direction without his command, reading intent. He acquiesced. They descended like silent avalanche. Roofs of turf and timber hove into view, rising smoke curling from cook fires. Dogs barked, then fell silent under psychic hush of approaching colossus. The first scream rose only when wings eclipsed stars. Frozen wind blasted through avenues, snuffing flames. The dragon landed upon central clearing, claws crushing sleds and storehouses. Euron dismounted with fluidity stolen from adrenaline. He strode among scattering northerners, cloak threshing, eye glittering. They saw death given form, yet recognized neither king nor kraken. To them he was phantom on pale steed. One burly hunter raised an axe. Euron's dirk flashed. The man staggered, blood steam in moonlight. At first drop, something shifted in dragon's posture. Nostrils flared to catch scent. Frost issued but mixed with intangible warmth, desire, nourishment. It lowered head to corpse. Jaws parted. Bite was swift, clean. Flesh froze solid before shattering under teeth, scattering crystalline gore. It lapped with flick of serpentine tongue. Life heat splintered across palate, fueling furnace within cold engine. In seconds, corpse diminished to ice-crusted skeleton. Panic erupted. Euron led it. He pointed toward barns where livestock bawled, instructing the dragon by thought. It smashed roof with tail, inhaled the warm reek of penned goats. A single breath suffocation froze bleats mid-throat, leaving statues ready for harvesting. Euron surveyed carnage, every shriek another rivet hammered into legend. He would let a few escape, messengers to spread terror. Word of Ice Dragon under Greyjoy banner would scatter across north faster than ravens. But a new sound cut through outcries. Horns from upper ridge. 3 blasts overlapping. Not the Watch's clarions, these were deeper, made by mammoth bone. Free folk warbands, with Mance Raider dead, Clans still roved, wary of both wall and others. They would not meekly yield. Dark silhouettes poured from tree line, torches aloft, slings spinning. Stones hurled spark trails before slamming dragons' flanks. Tiny fractures spidered across scales. Harpoons tipped with alchemy crackled on impact. One stuck between plates. Internal burst coughed powder flame. Dragon recoiled, tail lashing. Spruce trunks splintered like reeds. Euron barked. Laughter. "Bold fools," he called, voice drowning horns. "Come, test the night that walks." The air whipped at him, iron head wrapped in boiling pitch. He sidestepped. Spear sailed past, burying into snow. He strode forward, dirk replaced by handaxe stolen from Skagos chieftain. The weapon's haft bore teeth strung by sinew, blade etched with glyphs that drank moon. He spun it, a grim flourish. First warrior met him head-on, tattooed chest bare despite cold, twin knives flashing. Euron caught left knife unhalved, pivoted, drove axe across collarbone. Blade snagged breastbone, tore free with wet crack. Blood misted, freezing mid-spray into crimson gristle. Corpse toppled, limbs convulsing. Fight blossomed chaotic. 20, 30 free folk closed around Dragon's hindquarters, hacking chains, prying scale, seeking weakness. One climbed the tail, dagger in teeth. The beast snarled. Frost sleet flensing skin from attackers. Bodies dropped, encased in brittle rind. Those behind trampled them, uncaring. Euron split a skull, parried spear thrust, drove knee into groin of youth before slitting throat. He lost sense of numbers, battles blurred into red and silver. All while dragon's wings buffeted, lifting dust storms of frost that masked friend from foe. A horn bellowed again, but not from ridge. This was mournful, brassy. Night's watch alarm from Eastwatch by the sea. Their ravens must have reached from wall breach. Brothers in black now marshaled. Snowscape echoed with marching, with sled skids drawn by horses and oxen repurposed from wildling tithes. Scorpions rolled on iron wheels, quarrels tipped with dragon glass and fire. Time narrowed. Euron evaluated calculus. Hold ground to feed dragon, or ascend once more and strike in transit. He whistled, a shrill pitch cutting through gale, though he knew no mortal ear could have taught this beast. Still, dragon's head snapped toward him. Through threads he sent message, sky now. It leapt, wings unfurling, scattering friend and foe. Euron sprung, fingers catching spur of shoulder blade, hauling onto back as wings hammered. Claws raked timber as impetus. They launched in gust of white. Warriors flung ropes but came away with coiled air. Spears rose, fell futile. Above treetops they soared, leaving hamlet smoking with frost and riddled by hoarfrost statues. Night's watch column in distance halted, seeing apparition lift. They loosed first scorpion bolt. It traced fiery arc, dot. Dragon tipped wing. Bolt sailed past, embedding distant drift with hiss. The second bolt struck wing membrane, tearing hole. Pain transmitted through threads. Euron gritted teeth, forced calm. The dragon banked, angled sunward where horizon bruised violet with pre-dawn. He considered turning to obliterate watch cohort, yet risk of harm outweighed glory now. Instead he guided dragon along coast, skimming waves that shattered into spindrift under frost aura. Salt spray froze, leaving glimmering wake. Below, sea lanes lay quiet, fishing cogs anchored near cliffs. They turned bow to watch monstrous silhouette slice dawn. Some fled, others anchored, nets forgotten in awe. Euron breathed brine and victory. He glanced backward, walls wound still steaming. Through whiteness he glimpsed swarm of whites descending pass into gift. The others, prison, perhaps broken or circumvented. Inevitability marched once more, but now whites might follow banner of crow's eye rather than ancient kings. To bend them fully, he required proof. The dragon itself would serve. Yet he must demonstrate mastery, visible to file and rank of dead. And there was something else. Rumor in Old Town speak of ice-heart crystals embedded in chests of others, cores of their power. To wield undead host he might wrest such heart, fuse it with his obsidian disc. Plans layered. First, secure sanctuary to rest dragon, mend wounds, and anchor loyalty. Isle of Skagos, too wild. Eastwatch seized. Too soon. Better. Shield Island's fortress he had taken months prior. Oakenshield. Mild winter, stores abundant, and garrison replaced by his thralls. Far from north, but reachable by sky within hours. There he could feed Drake on cattle and war prisoners, patch wing with stitched sails soaked in resin. He steered southwest, sun-edged horizon, pale gold lacquer over cobalt. Dragon scales refracted dawn, each facet painting ocean in prismatic shards. Where light hit tear and membrane, steam coiled. Healing progressed slower in warmth. They flew high, so high breath crystallized before leaving lips. Euron's cloak stiffened, edges snapping like cracked leather. Hand axe, he tucked into belt, knuckles burned with micro-fractures from frost. Hours passage blurred, archipelagos slipped under. At midday, squalls gathered. Storm clouds pregnant with sleet rose before them. Dragons surged into gray belly, wings punching vortices in heavy air. Lightning rippled, but each bolt that struck scales diffused into spider webs of blue spark. Energy tasted sweet. Euron felt static tingle his bones, reinvigorating. Inside Storm's thundering heart, a memory flared. Visions gleaned from stolen shadowbinders long drowned. Tale of great Leviathan of cold, who once roamed beyond curtain of light, enslaved by sorcerer king to freeze his enemies' seas. Beast rebelled, devouring kingdom in one gulp. Only horn carved from its own rib could reclaim obedience. Euron wondered if his ice dragon bore lineage to that myth. He resolved to return to fortress ruins, salvage horn shards, reforge if needed. Oakenshield's outline emerged mid-afternoon, a pine-clad crag ringed by surf, castle crowning highest headland. Sails of his remaining fleet moored in crescent below. Smoke rose from smithies, repurposed to Sharon forges. Dragon banked, winds spiraling downward. Thralls upon walls gaped, dropping tools. Gongs hammered warning, but they recognized Euron as figure astride sky horror. Cheers of reluctant zeal mixed with terror. He guided Dragon to alight upon cliff plain east of keep where goat pens sprawled. Landing quake toppled fences. Goats bleated once, froze as frost aura spilled. Beast turned to feed. Within minutes, pens lay silent, only hoarfrost statues marking where life pulsed. Euron dismounted, joints screaming. He strode toward keep, cloak tattered to ribbons. Soldiers parted. Lord Steward, former Reach Knight named Ser Holga Hightower, tongue removed months past, knelt offering parchment slate for orders. Euron scrawled, hide no food, bring full herds, gather smiths, salvage chain iron ready to forge. He returned to Dragon, watching it tear goat carcass, swallowing shattered marrow. He approached head cautiously, touched muzzle, crusted with frost and blood. Beast rumbled satisfaction. Through thread, he sensed gratitude. Hard to read. He whispered, name yourself. No spoken answer. An image, swirling vortex of snow, inside void, lit by crackling aurora. A sound, rending ice, thence, tempest of hollow winter. Too long. He pruned to single note, Valaka. In old Valyrian dialect he gleaned from ashen scroll, meaning glare of dead stars. The dragon accepted. Days folded in fever of activity. Blacksmiths hammered chain into scale patches. riveting plates along wounded membrane, lined with sailcloth soaked in pitch, then frozen to rigidity harder than iron. Warlocks, 2 more arrived by skiff. Survivors from Korth diaspora painted runes along dragon's sternum using mixture of gallroot and ground dragon glass. Ritualists burned nightshade incense, weaving spells to anchor Euron's dominion. Meanwhile, he drafted letters, inked in his own blood, to lords of western coasts. Some he bribed with spoils, others he threatened with demonstration flights across their castles, turning rivers to glass. Ravens flew. On third night, moonless, alarm bells tolled. Scouts reported sails off horizon. Red wine galleys from Arbor, coalition with Tyrell loyal remnants, 30 hulls. They sought to retake Shield Islands lost to Greyjoy reavers. They expected longships, not frostworm. Euron armed, black armor, pauldrons gilded with kraken tentacles, dragonbone patch polished. He mounted Valaka, which lunged skyward trailing comet tail of rime. Fleet below tried to scatter, oars flashed. Catapults fired flaming pitch. Flames winked against sleet aura, guttering into ash. Valaka's roar split night. It exhaled across central formation. Breath rolled like glacier avalanche. Each galley encased instantly. Masts burst as water within grain expanded. Crews froze. Mid-scream, statues of horror. Dot. Ships heeled, cracked along keels, slipped beneath foam to join coral thrones. Outer galleys tried to ram dragon with fire ships. Euron guided craft to skim water. Wingbeats spawned rogue waves that capsized lion figurehead carracks. Bolts from large scorpions soared. He weaved between, one bolt clipping gauntlet, numb shock through arm. He singled flagship Arbor's pride, weaving descent, dragon scraped deck, claws uprooting ballista. Euron leapt among sailors, axe churning arcs luminous with spray of icy sparks. He carved path to mast, split sail lines so they tangled riggings. Then he signaled Valakar. The dragon perched on aft castle, tail annihilating helm wheel. It roared into hold, frost breaths gored hull from within. Ship cracked like eggshell, water flooding. Euron leapt back onto dragon before deck vanished under foam. Victory took less than an hour. Lanterns lit wreckage field of jagged icebergs that hours before were proud wine fleets. Survivors bobbed, pleading. Dragon circled, occasionally dipping to snatch Shrieker and devour, leaving crimson snow. Back at Oakenshield, thralls greeted return with a fear that settled into bleak fealty. They witnessed dragons of fire under Targaryen. Now they saw winter given fangs. Euron convened war council, captains missing tongues, but still apt scribes, Carthene sorcerers, Hightower steward. He mapped conquest. First Old Town, the starry scepter would blaze in frozen ruin. Citadel's glass candles would melt to ash of frost. Masters would kneel, forging ravens to claim new age. Then Stormlands, Dornish deserts he'd leave for dragon to learn heat, a challenge. Finally King's Landing, where Aegon's skull would witness second conquest. Yet he knew deeper game. Others' horde marched south through Gift. To control them, he must seize Heart of Winter. Warlocks revealed prophecy. Encrypt beneath fists of the first men lay shard of original ice wrought when long night birthed. Whoever brandished shard might steer dead. He resolved to retrieve. Valakar would carry him back through wall wound larger now. Before departure, he oversaw forging of new horn. Fragments of dragon binder fused with lead lines of broken chain, riveted into stouter instrument. Runes carved from weirwood sap hardened black by ice fire. Warlocks anointed with blood of goat and man both. They named Horn Soulwinter. Its call would thrall not just dragons, but hearts long still. Euron felt bones hum when he caressed ridges. They left Oakenshield at dawn of 7th day, Valakar healed, wings patched silver. A retinue of 5 longships sailed south to raid stepstones, fund war forges. The rest remained to fortify supply. Flight north tested stamina. Valakar flew tirelessly. Hunger sated by fish ice, they scooped mid-flight, freezing into brittle clusters before crunching. At dusk 2nd day, wall reared. Breach ironically sealed by overlapped ice flows, but weak. Dragon's frost breath widened aperture. Beyond lay Nightmare Field. Thousands of whites crossing Gift, their passage marked by dead forests, rivers frozen mid-cascade. Yet they moved without central guidance, attacking farmsteads but dissolving in sunlight due to lack of command. The others lacked numbers. They awaited hard to empower, perfect for seizure. Euron directed Dragon along path to Fist, hill rising from forest deep. Snow devils danced around ringfort of ancient stones. At summit he dismounted, warlocks trailing, bearing Soulwinter. Ravens cawed circumventing gale, uneasy. Within pit, at hill's center, they uncovered chamber carved before Age of Heroes, walls smooth obsidian, air glacial. At dais, floated crystal like slab of moon-pale diamond, edges dripping sub-zero mist, pulsed faintly, heartbeat of epoch. Whites encircled hill. Euron felt them swarm but held trust in Valakar, perched above, wings mantled to blot out night stars. Inside chamber, he lifted crystal. It weighed nothing yet, burdened soul. Cold stabbed marrow, but he withstood. He raised Soulwinter, pressed mouth. Warlock shielded ears, though prophecy said. Sound traveled through spirit rather than air. He blew. Silence, yet not. World's hum changed, trees stiffened. Wind paused, snowflakes hung. Outside, whites halted mid-stride. A vibration traveled ground like deep whale song. Overhead, Valakar roared in resonance, not pain, but synergy. Euron walked outside. Thousands of frost-etched eyes swiveled to him. He lifted crystal. Whites knelt as one, silence so complete it deafened. Another strode forward, surviving lieutenant. It approached warily. Euron presented crystal. Spear lowered. He met ice-blue eyes with his single black. Then, he shattered crystal on spearhead. Shards embedded chest, releasing blizzard swirl that enveloped Spectre. When storm cleared, other knelt, spear reversed, point lowered. Euron mounted Valakar once more. He directed undead, host south. An avalanche of bodies stomping rhythms that quaked earth. Warlocks gasped at sight. Paradigm changed, not siege, but crusade. He would ride at vanguard, ice dragon circling overhead, Soulwinter strapped to saddle. Letters to lords would follow. Choice would be simple. Bow now to Winter Kraken, or bow later a statue of rhyme. Beneath him, Valakar surged skyward, Frosttail flicking, starlight. Behind, host marched, swallowtail of doom. Ahead, kingdoms lay sleeping in delusion of safety. Euron Greyjoy smiled, and in that moment dawn abandoned the world. No Chayaf Andilitown Tibi. The first stirrings of true winter accompanied the march. It began not as a storm, but as a thinning of light, sunrise that never fully bloomed, dusk that arrived before the day had drawn breath. By the time the ragged edge of Euron's horde reached the snow-clad foothills of the last river, dawn and twilight had fused into a perpetual bruise, a sky smeared violet and green, where the dying auroras still writhed like severed nerves across cloudless heights. Below that bruised canopy, the dead brought their own shadows. They advanced in wedges 9 bodies deep, 9 wide, each knot repeating until the formation stretched back to the fist and beyond. Whites lurched with mechanical regularity, limbs sawn by frost yet moving in unison, guided now by a will no longer distant. Between each wedge stalked half-dozen others, their crystalline armor refracting the sickly light. And directly beneath the great arcs of pale wings, at the vanguard of all, rode Euron Greyjoy, astride Valakar, horned helm black against the dragon's sheet-white scales. When the army spilled at last from tree line onto the King's Road, the first hamlet in their path did not so much resist as disintegrate. Thatch roofs collapsed beneath the dragon's passing breath. Wells froze solid, splitting stone sleeves. Livestock shattered into gravelings of meat and crystal. Those few farmers who tried to flee found their own tears turning to needles that stitched their eyes shut before death claimed them. Euron let the slaughter play out for no more than a quarter hour. He wanted witnesses. He halted the horde with a single piercing note from Solwinter, then allowed 3 townsfolk, grandmother, miller's wife, half-grown stable boy, to stumble through drifts and vanish south along the road. Their sobs echoed like flutes in the hush that followed. Rumor would ride them faster than any raven. Thereafter the march became a procession of abandoned villages, each coughing up refugees who saw the frost-veiled monstrosity in the sky and chose terror over futile stands. Euron found it almost disappointing. He sought a battle worthy of the song he meant to carve across continents, yet field after field lay open, lordless, waiting. Even Karhold, long the stark bulwark in the east, offered only shuttered gates and silent ramparts. By the time Valakar's breath rained against its curtain wall, Euron sensed the keep had been stripped to foundations. The Karstocks had fled, likely toward Winterfell, so he pressed west, deeper into the heart. Winterfell's towers rose out of a fog of their own steam, hot springs, exhaling as though a slumbering giant drew breath beneath the stones. Snow already mantled the battlements, but sluices cut through ice to emit billows of warmth that twisted skyward. The castle looked less fortress than dream half remembered, its walls charcoal under acid-green lights, its banners stiff with frost. Euron hovered out of bowshot, weighing spectacle against strategy. He knew who stood within. Ravens had reported days ahead, Sansa Stark styled Queen in the north, Bran the Broken, Lord of Winterfell, and rumored seer, Arya the Swift Blade with a wolf's heart, and Jon Snow, once a bastard and always a threat to any tyrant claiming dragons. Alongside them, Queen Daenerys Stormborn, survivor of fire, breaker of chains, mother of the last 2 living fire dragons. She had sailed east months earlier to escape the ruin of King's Landing, only to return when word spread of northern dead walking again. Euron's mouth curled at the thought. Everywhere, legends jostled for breath, yet he alone commanded legend made flesh. He allowed his army to encircle Winterfell in patient hush. Whites fanned outward, establishing a ring beyond Scorpion range. Others drifted between them like flakes of sharpened glass. Beyond that cordon, Euron pitched a single pavilion of black silk trimmed in rust-red kraken tentacles. A standard, a kraken clutching a white dragon in its coils, rose above. He set braziers outside, burning coals mined from ashite that gave off no heat, only oily fumes that shimmered blue. Then he waited. At dusk of the second day, a lone rider departed the winter town and picked a path through drifts toward his pavilion. The stallion slipped twice on black ice yet regained footing, foam freezing on reins. When the rider dismounted, she removed her wolf fur hood and unveiled hair like autumn wheat, red fading toward dusk. Sansa Stark's face bore the calm terror of one who had survived too many betrayals to be cowed by a fresh abomination. She stopped 10 paces from the pavilion, boots half submerged in rime-encrusted mud. "Lord Greyjoy," she said, voice carrying past the hiss of coals. "If that is a title you still esteem." Euron smiled, motioned her nearer. "Titles are for those who fear to name their own hungers," he said. "Yet call me king if it pleases your tongue." Her chin lifted. I call nothing king while Starks draw breath. He admired her poise. Then perhaps you will find yourselves breathless soon. He gestured to the expanse of unmoving dead. But I am no monster without courtesy. I offer parley. Yield Winterfell, open your gates, and I shall permit your people north of the neck to swear fealty under my peace. Resist, and I unleash a winter that soured the long night itself. No offers for me? She asked, voice steady. Lady Sansa? He tilted his head. Or queen, if you insist. I think a place at my side most fitting. A counselor, an advisor on northern ways. You might keep your godswood and your hot springs, perhaps even your heart if you share it wisely. Sansa breathed once, misting. I will do you a courtesy of decline. A shame, he murmured, watching the shiver she suppressed. For each mercy refused, a harsher lesson must follow. She did not flinch. Instead, she drew a parchment from her sleeve and tossed it onto the coals. The parchment curled, edges blackening, but words of Maester's hand. Ink mixed with ground dragon glass, flared violet before flame devoured them. Euron caught only a fragment, glorious conflagration. What message that? He asked. Only the truth. Dragons do not freeze, she replied, turned and remounted without waiting dismissal. Euron considered pursuit. A jesting swoop of Valakar's shadow could sap valor from the stoutest heart, but dismissed it. Better to let her return, courage intact, to counsel defense and thus guarantee the legend of his cruelty when she failed. He signaled the warlocks inside pavilion. They emerged, sparks of frost flickering about their fingertips. Prepare the rite, he ordered. At moonrise, we break their walls. The rite demanded blood, not common blood, but that of one touched by magic. Warlocks produced a prisoner, a young man snatched from ruin of hard-home seasons past. Skin marbled where cold had burned through veins, yet did not quite kill. They held him over a basin carved from weirwood, and Euron opened the fellow's throat with the same Skagos axe he'd used on the Arbor Fleet. Blood smoked on contact with cold air, swirling into glyphs that hovered above the basin before gusting outward. The glyphs settled upon Valakar's wings, sinking beneath scales, leaving runic frost veins snaking across alabaster hide. By moonrise, the dragon's chest glowed with cerulean incandescence. Euron climbed the war saddle. He raised Solwinter to lips and sounded a single chord. The note vibrated ground, rattling bones under flesh, shattering crystals at others' belts. The dead lifted faces as if feeling snow on skin. They no longer wore. The dragon responded with a sub-bass growl that rumbled into silence. They rose into starlit hush. Winterfell's walls gleamed slick with ice. Ramparts bristled with scorpions primed to loose quarrels tipped in dragon glass and wildfire. But fire dragons, Regal and Drogon, had taken roost within the inner courtyard, their vast silhouettes stretching from Great Keep to First Keep, necks weaving like twin serpents sniffing the wind. Circular patterns of steam rose from their nostrils as they tracked the pale leviathan spiraling above. Euron positioned Valakar high above the godswood, out of range, but near enough for the beasts below to taste his presence. He felt Regal's mind brush his, wild, wary, scented of pine and forge. Drogon's was hotter, furnace red, layered over with a memory of chains shattered in Marine. Neither projected submission. They were fire-given malt, unbroken. He loosed a second note. Solwinter's call tore through frequencies, searing gap between frost and flame. The shard hearts embedded in others thrummed, whites convulsed, their bodies jittering like marionettes. A pulse shot from Valakar's chest, a beam of condensed winter light that struck the wall above Winterfell's main gate. Ice did not merely accumulate, It replaced stone, expanding from the impact point in spidered webs. The granite cracked, split, and exploded outward under sudden pressure. In that instant, Rhaegal bolted skyward through a blossom of shattered roof tiles. Drogon followed, trailing tongues of fire that writhed against the night. Two columns of incandescent red and gold lanced upward, converging on the frost dragon. Euron felt the collision before it occurred. Heat smacking frost, soundless tremor across soul threads. He braced. Valakar tucked wings. Dovius just Rhaegal's jaws snapped where its tail had been. Drogon's flame sheet followed, wreathing sky in orange blast that illuminated clouds for miles. The ice dragon spun barrel roll through inferno. Flame washed across its scales, shedding sparks that died instantly. Where heat met runic frost, steam geysered, but scales held firm, reinforced by bloodright. They danced between towers as though the castle were a child's toy scattered across floorboards. Euron clung to saddle. An island of black iron braided into living meteor. Rhaegal dove from above, claws outstretched. Valakar met charge with shriek that scoured marrow. Jaws latched onto Rhaegal's forelimb. Crackle of ice raced across emerald scales, locking joint. Rhaegal roared agony. Drogon intercepted, shoulder-checking Valakar in fiery blossom. The ice dragon tumbled, wings buffeted. The pair of fire drakes pressed advantage, one biting, the other breathing flame that hammered against frost scales like molten hail. Steam-cloaked sky. For moments none below could see. Within the royal, Euron tasted doubt from his mount, first flicker. He bent low, pressing gloved palm to ridge above spine, murmuring shards of old tongue burned into him by Shadow's priests. Strength poured from his veins, costly spells surrendered for supremacy. The runes along Valakar's chest brightened, veins of frost peaked. The dragon snapped jaws, shearing Rhaegal's trapped forelimb clean at elbow. Rhaegal screamed, spiraled away, trailing blood that crystallized to ruby dust. Drogon lunged, but Valakar arched back, exhaled cone of pure cold. Flame crashed into cold midair, opposites colliding, birthing hurricane swirl. Pressure popped, a ring shock rattled Winterfell, splintering shutters. Castle defenders toppled. The shockwave sent Drogon chunking downward, wings flailing amid swirl of scalding sleep. Valakar seized Rhaegal's severed limb, hurled it like spear. The frozen limb pierced a turret. Embedding talons first, Euron guided Valakar into steep climb, out of vortex. Below, Drogon landed heavily in Godswood, smashing heart tree branches. Rhaegal crashed beyond walls, shrieking in agony. Daenerys' voice rose, a roar of authoritative Valyrian commands echoing in courtyard. Euron took vantage. He saw Jon Snow sprint across Inner Bailey toward Drogon, cloak snapping, Valyrian steel sword, long claw gleaming. Ghost, the direwolf, flanked him, white coat nearly invisible in whirling snow. Arya darted along battlement, launching quarrels from crossbow, loaded with dragonglass bolts, each finding white or other below, but too many to stem. Bran stood in weirwood window of Master's turret, eyes white, as though he looked through ravens circling overhead. Euron judged pieces. Fire dragons separated, one crippled. Defenders, numerous yet demoralized. The time to break was now. He signaled with Soulwinter, a keening note drawn halfway to heartbreak. The ring of dead surged inwards, white scrabbling through breach Valakar had made in main gate. Others strode behind, frost weapons ready to sever courage. They flooded courtyard as scorpions turned, releasing green-fletched quarrels. Most missed. Some struck whites, shattering brittle limbs but not slowing. When bolts hit others, they exploded in fractal burst that left no corpse, only drifting snow. Euron banked Valakar and dove straight at Drogon, who now reared to meet onslaught, despite scorched scales and battered wings. Daenerys perched astride, bronze and leather armor gleaming wet. She drew a spear tipped with forged Valyrian glass, gift from Cahor Smith. As dragons closed, she hurled spear. It knifed through blizzard seam, striking Valakar's neck between scale plates. Frost cracked, spear embedded. Steam burst violet, swirling. For first time, Euron felt true pain from his mount. A shrill keen erupted, tilting dive. Euron ripped spear free, blood crystal hissing along blade. He hurled it into night. Then he leaned forward and let Soulwinter fall from fist. The horn plummeted, clanging on Drogon's skull before tumbling to snow. Daenerys saw it. Her eyes widened as though knowing the instrument's potent thrall, even on fireblood. She reached for another spear. Too slow. Euron drew Nightglass dagger from boot, gift of Carthene warlocks, and cast it. The blade spun end over end, trailing contrail of black frost, embedding in Drogon's nostril. The dragon jerked, flame misfired, roiling sideways into Spar Tower. Valakar opened jaws wide, unleashed beam of zero darkness. The frost blast struck Drogon's throat at point blank. Flame died. Scales dulled, turning ashen. Drogon flapped blindly, tail thrashing. Still enormous strength remained. It bounded upward, colliding with Valakar mid-air, jaws locking about opposing neck. The weight of two titans smacked into ruined Spar Tower, collapsing half-wall. Euron and Daenerys now fought at arm's length, each atop thrashing dragon. Euron unsheathed kraken-hilt cutlass, metal blackened with blood sorcery. Daenerys drew small curved blade of Valyrian steel. Their dragons writhed, climbing in spiral of battered wings. Snow, ice, and sparks of cindered embers, hailstone defenders below. Euron slashed, blade screeching off Daenerys, sparks bursting. She countered, knife ringing across his vambrace, carving rent in leather but missing flesh. Their platforms lurched. Euron vaulted across gap from ridge to Drogon's shoulders, boots skidding on slick scales. She thrust upward, but he twisted, planted foot on spike, and hammered pommel into her helm. Brass rung. Daenerys staggered, almost tumbling. Below, Jon shouted something lost in wind. Ghost bayed. Firelight bloomed. Rhaegal, grievously wounded, crawled across Bailey, one-winged but snarling. Jon swung onto back, shouting Dracarys to coax Broken Dragon to one last flight. But Bran's ravens swarmed overhead, a cyclone of black feathers, and suddenly Drogon lurched, blinked, and fire roared anew from belly. Bran's ward touch had joined fight, guiding flames. Valakar reeled under conflagration. Scales glowed, runes sputtered. Euron felt bond slip, pain buckling resolve. He scanned for Soulwinter, lost below. Without it he could not reinforce Thrall. He kicked off Drogon's neck, leaping back to Valakar, but Daenerys seized his wrist mid-air. Momentary tableau, two monarchs suspended between beasts, snow swirling, frost and flame twisting. She hissed, "You will not break the world again." Euron's patch lifted, revealing sockets swirling with midnight void. He laughed, free hand yanking steel plug free from belt. The ice-hard crystal had shattered, reassembled through sorcery. He crushed it against her chest. Sub-zero shards exploded outward, lodging in scales in her breastplate, in her flesh. She screamed, ice webbed across armor. Still, she held his wrist. Weight of two bodies over stretch of nothing. Sudden lurch, Rhaegal, with Jon, slammed into Drogon's flank, forcing separation. Daenerys' grip cracked. Euron tumbled onto Valakar, Daenerys onto Drogon. Battle lines reset. Fire Queen astride, Black Drake, Fire King, astride, Maimed Green, Kraken Lord astride White Frost. Below, whites clashed with Winterfell guard, spears of obsidian versus dragonglass-tipped arrows. Arya vaulted from roof to roof, blade dancing. Sansa rallied perimeter inside Great Hall, organizing evacuation of small folk into crypts where dragonglass caches waited. Euron knew time turned. If stalemate persisted, defenders' numbers and Bran's warging might tilt scale. He needed cataclysm. He rasped incantations stolen from Shadowlands, forcing reserves of life inside Valakar into overdrive. Runes flared ultraviolet. Frost plumes darkened to black, vacuum cold such that space seemed warm. The dragon dove, ignoring fire blasts, and knifed into the open well of hot springs at Winterfell's core. Superheated water met absolute zero. Instant detonation, geysers of shattered ice and scalding steam rocketed skyward. The ground core buckled. Springs fed countless microfissures, spreading heat through castle. Now turned to ice, pressure equalized outward in cracks that rent floors of Great Hall, collapsed crypt ceiling. Drogon and Rhaegal reeled as sheets of frozen mist blotted vision. Valakar emerged amid crystal shards rising like petrified trees, its body steaming with paradox heat. It roared, and Free's pulse tunneled directly toward Great Keep, where Bran observed through white eyes. The blast splintered stone, tower began to topple. Bran's chair skidded, ravens shrieked. Jon saw, and dove Rhaegal toward brother's window. Drogon banked likewise, Daenerys yelling to coordinate. Euron felt taste of victory. One stark seer crushed would decapitate their foresight. He guided Valakar to slam shoulder into weakening wall, driving final fracture. With thunderclap, tower collapsed outward, debris tumbling its slow, majestic arc. Bran fell with stones, body limp as marionette cut free. But ravens swarm funneled around him, forming living net. As stones crashed, ravens lifted Bran, spirit-wrought, across courtyard to land atop Rhaegal behind Jon. Rhaegal screamed assent. Bran's eyes flickered, returning to brown. Euron swore. Fate refused to yield. He turned to darker measure. The glass candles retrieved from citadel burnings months earlier. 3 black obelisks strapped to Valakar's saddle. He lit them with tongue of sorcery. They ignited pale flame that bent shadows strangely. Through them, warlocks would channel necrotic resonance to shatter dragon psyches. He focused on Rhaegal first. Candlelight pulsed, thin beams stabbing like needles into green dragon's hide. Rhaegal convulsed, wings spasming. Jon fought to keep seat, Bran clutching. The dragon lost altitude, smashing into courtyard again, rib bones creaking under weight. Drogon roared at assault on brother, arcing toward Valakar. Daenerys loosed hail of Valyrian spears, each singing with flame, enchantment. 2 embedded in Valakar's flank, melt-dripping edges carving grooves. Frost blood jetted. Euron winced. He redirected candlelight, splitting assault between 2 drakes. Now Drogon slowed, flame sputtering. But Bran lifted hand. Ravens circled, attacked candle beams, bodies intercepting light streams. Each bird burst into embers on contact, yet hundreds took place. Light fractured, power diminished. Arya appeared atop broken rampart, spinning dragon glass bola. She hurled, bola-wrapped base of nearest candle, shattering it. Light died. Daenerys seized chance, spurring Drogon. Blistering flame torrent hammered Valakar, point blank. Frost scales cracked, runes flickered. Euron screamed incantation, but second candle burst under pressure. Power feedback detonating saddle pieces. Euron thrown sideways, hanging by belt strap hooked over scale. Below, Ghost leaped onto dead whites, carving path to Euron's detached horn. Soulwinter, half buried in snow. Direwolf clamped down, hauling artifact toward Jon. Jon Zahn dismounted Rhaegal, sprinted, retrieved horn. He lifted to lips. Bran's head whipped to him. Warning or guidance? Jon hesitated but saw Euron climbing back into saddle, drawing third candle to aim. Snowborn bastard blew. One. Soundless quake rippled. Dead froze, mid-stride. Others shrieked, ice weapons shattering in their grip. Valakar's runes spasmed crimson, linked to Euron fuzzed. Candle backfired, detonating in violet nova that tore half saddle away, ejecting Euron to open air. He plummeted, cloak ragged pennant. He crashed through roof of broken armory, landed amid shards of frozen armor. Blood leaked from mouth, but patch socket bled starlight. He rose on broken leg, spat, and laughed. A ragged thing. Winterfell's remaining defenders closed in. Arya with twin blades, Sansa bearing stark banner like spear, Jon hefting longclaw, bleeding blue fire. Daenerys descending on Drogon, flames licking. Euron looked to sky. Valakar spiraled, confused but not free. He roared command. Dragon slowed, recognized voice, yet uncertainty lingered. He unsheathed cutlass and charged. Steel clanged with Valyrian. Jon parried. Euron sidestepped, sliced Sansa's banner. Arya's knife flashed. He blocked, then backhanded her, sending her skidding. A gout of flame forced him back. Drogon perched, jaws opening, but Valaka slammed into him, frost horns cracking against black scales. Dragons tumbled, rolling beyond walls, out onto windswept field. Battle shrank to humans. Jon pressed attack, fury of northern snow. Each strike metallic thunder. Euron met with manic grin, feints unpredictable. Broken leg hampered, but adrenaline masked pain. He threaded point under Jon's guard, nicking bicep. Blood hissed. Sansa rushed with spear, but Euron caught shaft, twisted, throwing her aside. Arya vaulted onto his back, blade to throat. He slammed into wall, crushing her. She gasped, fell. He locked eyes with Jon. Bastard of dead kings, he sneered. You fight prophecy. I am prophecy. Jon answered with upward swing. Euron parried, but strength failed. Blade snapped. Longclaw continued, burying through mail into lung. Euron coughed, black blood, laughing even as it gurgled. He yanked himself deeper on sword, face inches from Jon's. Kill me, he whispered. The song goes on. He spat blood in Jon's face, then sagged. Jon withdrew blade. Euron dropped, knees collapsing. He chuckled until breath died. Outside, dragons disengaged. Valakar battered, bleeding frost, wings tattered. Drogon scorched, but alive. Rhaegal limped, but Stark bannermen corralled him into courtyard, soothing with spears reverse. Solwinter lay shattered where Jon cast it aside. The whites collapsed motionless. Without horn or master, they reverted to silent corpses. Others dissolved in ice dust. Winterfell burned and froze in equal measure. Towers razed, walls split, but Heart of North endured. Jon watched dawn creep. A truthful dawn at last, rosy and gold, over horizon. Snow still fell but gently, as though apologizing. Valakar circled once, wounded, then turned north, trailing mist, disappearing into pale sky, masterless. Daenerys slid from Drogon, walking to Jon's side. Bran wheeled near, silent, his ravens finally still. Sansa knelt beside Arya, binding ribs. Survivors converged, stunned. Jon stared at Euron's corpse. Is it over? He asked. Daenerys shook head, eyes on northern sky. Nothing is ever over. But, for that morning, silence returned to Winterfell. No horn, No roar, only soft crackle of thaw as ice began to melt away.